Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News, India's voice to the world. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Coming up in the next hour. Reform is the key to relevance, says Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as he calls for transforming global institutions at the UN Summit of the Future. Prime Minister Modi meets Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the UNGA meet, reaffirms support for peaceful resolution of the conflict with Russia. Israel and Hezbollah exchange fire after Lebanon suffers huge casualties. France calls for emergency UNSC meeting. US and the UK appeal for calm. And Hurricane John makes landfall in Mexico, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is en route to India after concluding his successful three-day visit to the United States. Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US was action-packed with significant events, including a bilateral meeting with President Joe Biden at his Delaware residence, the Quad Leaders Summit, and addressing the UN Summit of the Future, making this visit a decisive step in strengthening India's global partnerships and influence. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the Summit of the Future at the United Nations in New York on the third and final day of his visit, calling for the primacy of a human-centric approach in our collective quest for a bright global future. The Indian Prime Minister highlighted the country's success at scaling sustainable development goals. The Indian Prime Minister also called for urgent reform of the institutions of global governance, including the UN Security Council.
Global action must match global ambition.
The statement by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi defines the fundamental course correction needed for a sustainable and equitable future. Prime Minister Modi arrived at the 79th UN General Assembly session to address the Summit of the Future in New York. Prime Minister said, reforms are the only way forward for global peace and development.
वैश्विक शांति एवं विकास के लिए ग्लोबल संस्थाओं में रिफॉर्म्स आवश्यक है. रिफॉर्म is the key to relevance.
Apart from reform of multilateral institutions and the global governance architecture, the Prime Minister strongly reiterated India's long-standing position that resolution to global conflicts can only be brought about by engaging in dialogue, sitting across the table and not on the battlefield.
Success का हमारा यह अनुभव हम ग्लोबल साउथ के साथ साझा करने के लिए तैयार है.
Prime Minister said the world must prioritize a human-centric approach. He flagged the continuing threat of terrorism and cybercrimes and advocated strengthening the global digital governance and tech regulation. He also gave an example of how India successfully lifted 250 million people out of poverty. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in his address, underlined the key threats and opportunities in the path towards sustainable future. And with its remarkable achievements in poverty alleviation and advances in digital public infrastructure, Prime Minister emphasized that India can show the way. With my colleague Amritpal Singh and camera person Sanjay Jaina, Shubhendu Ghosh for DD India at UN headquarters in New York.
Prime Minister Modi also held a bilateral meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the Summit of the Future in New York. The two leaders recalled Prime Minister's recent visit to Ukraine and expressed satisfaction at the continued consolidation of bilateral ties. The situation in Ukraine, as well as the way forward on pursuing a path to peace, also figured prominently in their discussions. Prime Minister Modi reiterated India's clear, consistent and constructive approach in favour of a peaceful resolution of the conflict with Russia through diplomacy and dialogue, as well as engagement between all stakeholders. He conveyed that India remains open to provide all support within its means to facilitate a lasting and peaceful resolution of the conflict. This was the third meeting between the two leaders in little over 3 months.
Their discussions on all matters, the bilateral issues as well as issues surrounding the Russia-Ukraine conflict. President Zelensky was very appreciative of India's attention to these issues and said that Prime Minister's visit had been highly appreciated, and he thanked the Prime Minister for the efforts that he was making for peace and a pathway to finding a way out of this conflict. Both sides appreciated that there was positive momentum on a lot of issues in the bilateral relationship, and they agreed to remain in close touch, either directly or through exchanges of visits at various other levels.
President Zelensky thanked Prime Minister Modi for his support to Ukraine on his social media platform X. He tweeted, and I quote him, "This is already the third bilateral meeting this year with the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. We are actively developing our relations and working together to strengthen cooperation across various fields. The main focus of our conversation was enhancing our interaction on international platforms, particularly at the UN and the G20, as well as implementing the peace formula and preparing for the second peace summit. We had a substantive discussion on the available opportunities. I'm grateful for the clear support of our sovereignty and territorial integrity." Prime Minister Modi also met other world leaders, including Vietnamese President, Armenian President and Secretary of the State of the Holy See. PM Modi and Vietnam's President Tho Lam took stock of the full range of India-Vietnam relationship. The two leaders deliberated on ways to enhance comprehensive strategic partnership, strengthen bilateral cooperation, as well as exchanged views on important regional and global issues. They also reaffirmed the importance of deep civilizational and cultural links between the two countries. PM Modi also met Armenian counterpart Nikol Pashinyan on the sidelines of the Summit of the Future. The Prime Minister also interacted with Secretary of State of the Holy See, Cardinal Pietro Parolin. The Holy See is the central government of the Catholic Church and is headquartered in the Vatican City. India's Prime Minister wrote on X saying that this has been a fruitful visit to the United States of America, covering diverse programs and focusing on a series of subjects aimed at making our planet better. Here are the highlights of his US visit. Visit, 72-hour visit to the United States of America, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a bilateral with the US President Joe Biden, and of course he participated in the 6th Quad Leaders Summit. We see here his counterparts from Japan and Australia. Then Prime Minister Narendra Modi also addressed the Indian community in New York and also held a roundtable with top tech CEOs of the United States of America. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is in the United States to attend the 79th General Debate Session of the UN General Assembly. Dr. Jaishankar met his counterparts from the G4 nations, reaffirming the grouping's commitment to urgent reform of the United Nations Security Council through text-based negotiations. The G4 nations comprise Brazil, Germany, India and Japan. Dr. Jaishankar also had a meeting with Foreign Affairs Advisor Mohammad Tawheed Hussain of Bangladesh in New York, focusing on bilateral ties. The UN General Assembly High-Level Week beginning on Tuesday with representatives of 193 member countries convening at the world body's headquarters in New York. This year's theme is Leaving No One Behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development and human dignity for present and future generations. The general debate, the key event of any UN General Assembly, begins on September 24th with speeches from leaders of member states. Each country will be given 15 to 20 minutes to speak before the international community. As is tradition, Brazil's president will be the first to take the podium, followed by US President Joe Biden. With 4 months left in office, Biden steps up to the green marbled lectern to address world leaders, with conflicts in both Europe and West Asia likely to outlast his presidency. So over the 6 days, a succession of world leaders will address the assembly, laying out their national priorities and views on global affairs. Still to come on DD India News Hour. Russia-China warships enter the Pacific for joint Navy drills. In the race to the White House, Kamala Harris maintains her 4-point advantage in Pennsylvania. And Anura Kumara Dissanayke's victory marks a significant shift in Sri Lanka's political landscape, but major challenges lie in front.
Welcome to Kumarakom, Kerala, God's own country.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I am Tanvi Taneja. On to the US now. Former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are campaigning in battleground states this week as they race to make their pitch to voters. Donald Trump made an impromptu visit to a local grocery store in the crucial 2024 election swing state of Pennsylvania, commiserating with staff about inflation, which he blamed on his Democratic rival Kamala Harris.
We're going to win the election. We're going to turn the country around. We're going to get energy prices way down. That's going to bring other prices way down. And we're going to take care of crime. We're going to stop the crime. And we're going to deport the criminals that have been brought into our country.
In Pennsylvania, one of 7 critical battleground states, Harris maintained her 4-point advantage, leading 50% to 46% with a margin of error of plus or minus 3.8 percentage points, according to the New York Times poll. Meanwhile, Republican Donald Trump said in an interview released on Sunday that he will not make a 4th consecutive run for the US presidency if he loses in the November election.
If you're not successful this time, do you see yourself running again in 4 years?
No, I don't. No, I don't. I think that will be it. I don't see that at all. I think that hopefully we're going to be successful.
On to Sri Lanka now. Sri Lanka's newly elected president Anura Kumara Dissanayake is set to pick his cabinet after he took the oath of office on Monday. Colombo-based and well-educated women's leader, National People's Power MP Harini Amarasureya is likely to be made the Prime Minister. In the cabinet, Vijita Herath and Lakshman Nipun Arachi are expected to be named as ministers. Lakshman Nipun Arachi was named as the MP in place of Dissanayake as he vacated his parliament seat. The NPP has 3 members in the parliament. Further, MP Vijita Herath has confirmed that the president has called a crucial meeting to discuss the potential dissolution of parliament, making way for parliamentary elections. Meanwhile, Ranil Wickremesinghe has said that he will not contest the upcoming parliamentary election or seek a place on the national list. DD India's Dr. Ahmed Moin Faruqi now joins us from Colombo on the latest. Dr. Faruqi, what are likely to be the major challenges or impediments in the Sri Lankan president's way in forming the government and managing the country and the economy?
Tanvi, good afternoon. And you see, you're rightly mentioning here the most important issues here. Because the new government, it requires sufficient members to be a part of the cabinet. Currently speaking, the NPP, which is primarily occupied by Janata Vimukti Peramna, it has only 3 members of the parliament, even after the president had vacated his seat and placed a replacement in his place. Still, there are only 3 members, and running a government only on the basis of 3 ministers, it is really difficult. In fact, NPP's executive committee members had earlier, during the run-up to the election, had mentioned that should they win, and they have won the election, but should they win the election, then they would see to it that sufficient members would be there from among the JVP who would be named as secretaries, and they would manage the government in that manner. There was also a hint that they could take members from other parties and other regions because they believe that there are good members from other parties and other regions as well. So it is still not clear as to what exactly would be the composition of the cabinet going forward. But for now, it is confirmed that it's going to be a 4-member cabinet, which includes the president, the prime minister, and 2 other members, that is Vijita Herath and Lakshman Nipun Arachi. But what is likely is that later on, if there's a dissolution that happens with regard to the parliament, all efforts will start towards the general elections, which can happen as early as end of November. Tanvi.
Okay, on the foreign policy front, how tricky will it be for Dissanayake to manage Sri Lanka's relations with both India and China?
Tanvi, it's a very tricky task for Mr. Dissanayake. Primarily speaking, if you look at the ideology of JVP, it has been a Marxist-Leninist party. However, ever since 2015-2016, it has adopted a more centrist approach. And ever since 2019, it has tried to be more liberal. And given all these developments ever since the economic crisis, it has maintained an approach in which it is equally vocal and equally aware with regard to the issues that had faced before the entire island, including the several of the projects that led to the economic debacle of the country. Where we have to also consider this, that many experts believe that the economic debacle of the country was linked to the white elephant projects, which were a part of the Chinese debt trap. That said, it is still a very difficult task for the new government because they do consider that India is a strategic and a very important partner of Sri Lanka, while at the same time, they have an ideology, an age-old ideology, which has some resonance with the Chinese ideologies as well. So it needs to be seen how the new government led by Mr. Dissanayake will go forward with this. However, that said, he has already mentioned in a reply to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi earlier on platform X that he looks forward to working closely with India. And he, in fact, in addition to that, he has also on several occasions while speaking to the Indian media, he has mentioned that his government will not do anything which is contrary to what exactly India would expect in terms of maintaining regional security and towards India's security interests. Tanvi.
Dr. Faruqi in Colombo, thank you very much for those updates.
Sure.
Next, on to updates from West Asia. Israel's large-scale airstrikes across Lebanon resulted in more than 492 deaths and over 1,500 injured as thousands of people in the south of the country flee for safety. Israel's army has said that it launched more than 650 attacks on some 1,300 Hezbollah targets across Lebanon over the past 24 hours. Israeli warplanes conducted intensive raids in southern and eastern Lebanon, forcing thousands of residents from the cities to flee towards Beirut and Mount Lebanon. Also on Monday, Israeli airstrikes in Beirut targeted Ali Karke, a senior Hezbollah commander. Later, Hezbollah issued a statement claiming that Karke is safe. In response to the Israeli attacks, Hezbollah fired over 150 rockets toward northern Israel throughout Monday since October 8, 2023. Hezbollah and the Israeli army have been exchanging fire across the Lebanese-Israeli border amid fears of a broader conflict in the region. Further, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sent a short video statement addressed to the Lebanese people. Netanyahu urged the people of Lebanon to get out of harm's way now.
I have a message for the people of Lebanon. Israel's war is not with you. It's with Hezbollah. For too long, Hezbollah has been using you as human shields. It placed rockets in your living rooms and missiles in your garage. Those rockets and missiles are aimed directly at our cities, directly at our citizens. To defend our people against Hezbollah strikes, we must take out those weapons. Now, starting this morning, the IDF has warned you to get out of harm's way. I urge you, take this warning seriously. Don't let Hezbollah endanger your lives and the lives of your loved ones. Don't let Hezbollah endanger Lebanon. Please, get out of harm's way now. Once our operation is finished, you can come back safely to your homes.
Meanwhile, world leaders and the United Nations called for urgent de-escalation of the conflict, with France calling for emergency UN Security Council meeting on Lebanon. France's Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot told the UN General Assembly on Monday that it has requested an emergency meeting of the Security Council to be held on Lebanon this week. Barrot said the strikes conducted on both sides of the Blue Line must immediately end.
À cet instant, je salue.
I commend the work of Blue Helmets. Each day they work for security and peace around the world. I am thinking of the men and women in Lebanon and the French continent there. These strikes conducted on both sides of the Blue Line and in the region more broadly must end. France once again calls on the parties and those that support them to de-escalate and avoid a regional conflict that would be devastating for everyone. For that reason, I have asked for an emergency meeting on Security Council on Lebanon this week.
The United States also called for de-escalation, with the spokesperson saying that the US does not support a cross-border escalation between Israel and Hezbollah, and that Washington was going to discuss concrete ideas with allies and partners to prevent the war from widening. The United Nations interim force in Lebanon has expressed grave concern for the well-being and safety of civilians and reiterated its strong call for a diplomatic solution.
I can tell you that the Secretary General is indeed alarmed by the escalating situation along the Blue Line. He's very concerned about the large number of civilian casualties being reported by the Lebanese authorities, as well as the thousands of displaced persons amidst the most intense exchange of fire across the Blue Line since October of last year. He expresses grave concern for the safety of civilians, both in southern Lebanon and in northern Israel, as well as the UN staff in those areas. Expect more.
In the region, US President Joe Biden met UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan for talks on conflicts in the Middle East and Sudan, despite concerns over the Gulf powers' own role in the Sudan conflict. In a joint statement, Biden and Sheikh Mohammed said that they shared the concern about the risk of imminent atrocities as fighting continues in Sudan's war-torn Darfur region. The two leaders also called for an immediate ceasefire in the brutal civil war between Sudan's army and the paramilitary rapid support forces and a return to the political process. Next, Updates from the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russia's air defense units reportedly destroyed about 13 Ukrainian drones on Tuesday. Out of the 13, 6 drones were destroyed each over the Belgorod and Kursk regions, while one was downed over the Bryansk region. On the other hand, Ukraine has alleged that Russia launched 81 drones and 4 missiles to attack the country overnight. The Ukrainian Air Force said that it shot down at least 66 drones, adding that it lost track of 13 more in several Ukrainian regions in a statement it issued via the Telegram messaging app. Now, a fleet of warships from Russia's Pacific and the Chinese Navy entered the Sea of Okhotsk in Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula as part of their joint Navy exercises. Russia said on Saturday that it was starting the joint Russian-Chinese Beibu Interaction 2024, a naval exercise that would include anti-aircraft and anti-submarine weapons. Russian large anti-submarine destroyers Admiral Panteliev and Admiral Tribats were among the warships taking part in these drills. An extra report that should concern us all. Climate change is making an impact all over the globe in different ways. From hurricanes to wildfires, the world is facing the inevitable effects of change in the weather patterns, extreme ones. Here's more.
The global impacts of climate change continue to upend normal life across the globe. The face of nature's fury may be different, but the devastating impact on people and their livelihoods is similar across the oceans. Hurricane John barreled into Mexico's southern Pacific coast as a major Category 3 storm. John came in Guerrero State, packing maximum sustained winds of around 195 kilometers per hour. According to US-based National Hurricane Center, Hurricane John will bring very heavy rainfall to coastal areas through the upcoming week. The rains are likely to bring large-scale flooding and devastation.
And you can see now the new updated hurricane forecast has it as a Category 3. A Category 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. That is a major hurricane from a wind perspective.
Asia, too, is bearing the brunt of unusually powerful weather patterns, pummeling rains and storm surges into the mainland. Even as it is still reeling from the devastation Typhoon Yagi brought, Vietnam is bracing for further mayhem. A tropical storm is forecast to make landfall in central Vietnam late on Thursday. Flooding in central Vietnam has killed 3 people and forced more than 10,000 residents to evacuate their homes. At least 7 people have died in Japan's Noto region after record rainfall triggered catastrophic floods and landslides. A tsunami advisory has been issued by Japan after an earthquake with a magnitude of 5.9 on Richter scale occurred in the Pacific Ocean, near Torishima Island on Tuesday. Vast swathes of South America are witnessing forest fires that have swamped huge tracts of forests in no time. After Brazil and Peru, now in Argentina, which is fighting wildfires that has devastated over 16,000 hectares of land, is suffering. 700 firefighters have been trying to control the spread of the blaze since a week, but strong winds and lack of rain are making their task difficult.
Marco, en el Totoralejo,
we are suffering from the fire crisis. We don't have much help from anyone. We are together with the families trying to put out the fire and waiting to see what will happen if it continues to advance.
Extreme weather events such as drought, wildfires and floods are expected to get much worse in the following years as global temperatures continue to rise. Bureau Report for DD India.
Still to come on DD India News Hour. Digital public infrastructure should be a bridge, not a barrier, says Prime Minister Modi at the UNGA. We discuss the highlights of his US visit with our expert. India's Industry Minister Piyush Goyal visits Australia to explore investment opportunities.
geopolitics and trade deals, economic challenges amid development, hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the Economic Brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India.
Thank you for staying with us. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Tanvi Taneja. A quick look at the headlines we're tracking at this hour. Reform is the key to relevance, says Indian Prime Minister Modi as he calls for transforming global institutions at the UN Summit of the Future. Israel and Hezbollah exchange fire after Lebanon suffers huge casualties. France calls for emergency UNSC meeting. US and UK appeal for calm. And Hurricane John makes landfall in Mexico, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. And going back to our top story, Prime Minister Narendra Modi completed an intense 72-hour visit to the US. His packed schedule included discussions with US President Joe Biden, participation in the 6th Quad Summit, addressing the UN Summit of the Future, meeting with top CEOs and other bilateral meetings. And to discuss all the takeaways of Prime Minister's 3-day visit to the US, we have with us former senior diplomat Mohan Kumar. Welcome, sir, to the program. Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the UN stressed for the need for urgent reform of the global institutions, including that of the UNSC. Tell us, why is this so important, the need for India's membership in it, and the hurdles in the way?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think it's been very clear for some time now, several years, that the United Nations has not been delivering. You just take the two most important conflicts in the world. We have the conflict in Ukraine raging, and then you have the Middle East up in flames. And what you cannot help but notice is the complete impotence of the UN Security Council and its inability to act in these circumstances. So I think the Prime Minister is absolutely correct in saying that if global action has to match ambition, and he says global ambition is there, but there is no global action. I think he wants to make the central point that you can act only if the institutions are reformed. And obviously, the United Nations, as the mecca of all multilateral organs, has to be the place where reform has to begin first. And the UN Security Council absolutely is crying out for reform. You did ask me, Tanvi, about the obstacles. And I think the fact that it has taken 20-25 years would signal to you that there are very serious obstacles in the way. Most importantly, the permanent members of the Security Council who want to cling on to the veto. Some of them have objected to India's entry, China in particular. But more than anything else, I think the tipping point has been reached. The question really is there going to be now pressure on the United Nations to reform? Because the UN knows otherwise that it will be reduced to complete irrelevance in today's world.
UN General Assembly Prime Minister Modi also spoke of India's willingness to share its digital public infrastructure for the global good. How do you see the statement's relevance in today's world?
Well, I think it's fantastic that he made 2 points actually in terms of sharing. One, he said, of course, as you rightly say, he said the digital public infrastructure, the India stack, has worked well for India, and we will be very happy to share with it. And I can confirm to your viewers that we are sharing that as we speak, and for a very, very small cost. It's not as if we are making money on it. So especially the Aadhaar technology and so on, we are helping a range of countries, trying to help them with digital public infrastructure. The other thing we also the Prime Minister also made was that our own development experiences in India whether it is about abolishing poverty, whether it's about direct benefit transfer. These are also things which we are happy to share, because the Prime Minister makes the point that India has made progress. We are happy to share this development experience with other countries of the South, thereby making the point that experiences in the North may not easily be relevant for countries of the South. So I really think that was a very generous offer to make. I would conclude this segment by merely telling your viewers that this is leadership of the global South. It's not lending money. It's not the amount of money that you lend. It's not the rhetoric. It is really, when it comes to leadership of the global South, you have to act. You have to deliver, and you have to make sense. I think the Prime Minister did all of those three by essentially addressing the countries of the global South and saying that we are happy to share experiences with them.
Okay, two other key issues Prime Minister Modi raised at the UN General Assembly were cyber, maritime and space emerging as new areas of the conflict, and the need for a human-centric approach in our collective quest to a bright global future. So these issues have assumed such critical importance in the world today. So according to you, what must be done to address them?
So I think beginning with cyber, what we are seeing is the attacks on hospitals, schools and telecom structures with disturbing regularity. The Quad statement underlined that as well. So one of the things that India is doing, and India has taken the leadership position in the context of Quad, is to train people of the Indo-Pacific countries. We will begin with the countries of the Indo-Pacific, trying to provide training to the people who are involved with cyber, making sure that their countries can take actions against these attacks. So that is the concrete thing that India is doing under its leadership in the context of Quad. But you also mentioned maritime, and there again, the quadrilateral security dialogue has an interesting component of again providing training. It's called Maitri, and it's the maritime information training of the international, the participants. And I think if India and other countries can also help the countries of the global South, and when I say Indo-Pacific countries, I'm talking of very small countries in the Pacific Islands and others in East Asia, who may not have the resources to actually do real-time international maritime domain awareness. The Information Fusion Center in Gurgaon has been brought into the Act. The quadrilateral mentions this center, and this is where I think we can help countries with real-time domain awareness in their maritime region, so that can help them enforce the law on their shores.
On the economic front, Sir, Prime Minister Modi hosted a roundtable of top tech CEOs from the US to enhance cooperation between India and the US in cutting-edge technologies such as that of AI, quantum computing and semiconductors. So what were the positive economic takeaways for India?
So Tanvi, I can't imagine a better environment than now. You do know, and your viewers know, that there are serious reservations about the West sharing technology, especially cutting-edge technology, with China. In the context of this, one country which has the size, the scale, is India. You know, you've heard the saying, data is the new oil. If China's data is going to be difficult to access for obvious reasons, can you imagine the next country which has enough data with it, which can then be useful for tech companies? I think India is an automatic choice. If something works in India, it will work in the rest of the world. So I genuinely think that the tech segment is very important. PM always makes it a point to meet with the CEOs of tech companies, the names of who's who were there in this particular meeting. I would say the three things that come to mind. One is semiconductor, which I see on the screen now. I think there is a move to establish foundries and fabrication units in India. There is a move to actually include India as a key part of the resilient supply chain. The second is biotechnology, and India has obvious advantages in it. And the third, I would say, is artificial intelligence and quantum computing. Where I think India can make a signal contribution is in using the reservoir of engineers and scientists that we have. We may not have the hardware, but we have what I call the humanware. You need software, you need hardware, but you also need personnel, you need human beings. And I think that is where I think India can make a real contribution. The ethical use of artificial intelligence is something that India has been saying for a very, very long time. So all in all, it is the emphasis on the tech partnership between US and India, which can actually prove to be a game changer, not just for the bilateral relationship, for the world.
Briefly, sir, the key takeaways from the 6th Quad Leaders Summit from India's perspective.
Oh, I think there was strong language used on Indo-Pacific. There has always been strong language, but I thought this time it was a little pinpointed. It was clear. I think there was mention about South China Sea, East China Sea. And I think the real fear is that you already have two major theaters of war, one in Gaza, one in Ukraine. You don't want a hot war in Indo-Pacific. That's the first. The second, I think, is that the quadrilateral now has reached a phase where I think enough of principles and declarations they have to deliver. They've started delivering. So what you are seeing is the action phase of quadrilateral security dialogue. And I think that will make a very big difference in terms of the impact of Quad in the world today.
Also because India is hosting the next Quad meeting next year. Thank you very much, Mohan Kumarji, for your views and analysis on the subject. India's President Draupadi Murmu inaugurated the Assembly of the Asian Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions, ASOSAI, in Delhi. The 4-day conference will be followed by a series of discussions on the evolving role of Supreme Audit institutions in fostering transparency and accountability. The Assembly is witnessing the participation from over 200 delegates representing 42 countries and international organizations, underscoring the diverse and collaborative nature of the organization. A key highlight of this year's assembly is the assumption of the chair of ASOSAI by the CAG of India, Girish Chandra Murmu, for the term 2024 to 2027. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh inaugurated the 41st edition of the Indian Coast Guard Commanders Conference at the Coast Guard headquarters in New Delhi. The conference is an apex annual gathering and serves as a vital forum for the ICJ senior commanders to engage in meaningful discussions on pressing strategic, operational and administrative matters, all framed against the backdrop of shifting geopolitical landscapes and complexities of maritime security. As a pivotal forum, the Commanders' Conference underscores the Indian Coast Guard's unwavering commitment to safeguarding India's maritime interests and reaffirming the role of the guardian of the nation's maritime frontiers. The conference will come to a close on 26th of September. And India's Minister of Commerce and Industry Piyush Goyal acknowledged his meeting with the Premier of the New South Wales of Australia, Chris Minns. During the meeting, the two leaders discussed deepening trade ties with NSW and Maharashtra, which are sister states. The Indian minister said on X that he invited Minns to visit India along with the business and parliamentary delegation. Piyush Goyal also said that he is grateful for his appreciation on the success of India-Australia Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement and his support for advancing the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement. And to further boost bilateral economic engagement, India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal visits Australia. This visit ends on Wednesday. The minister is there to interact with leading Australian and Indian CEOs, discuss investment avenues. As at the Parliament of New South Wales, Goyal emphasised the important role the Parliamentary Friends of India and AIBC play in fostering economic growth. Speaking at the 22nd National Conference organised by CREDAI National Conference in Sydney, Goyal expressed his gratitude, meeting industry leaders in the real estate sector and discussing the incredible opportunities that lie ahead as India builds its path to becoming developed by 2047. Later, at the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity Ministerial meeting, Goyal emphasized on collective efforts and forward-thinking action plans in critical sectors such as that of semiconductors, critical minerals for clean energy, chemicals, healthcare. He mentioned India's firm commitment to collaborate with IPEF member nations to foster economic growth towards shared prosperity. Still to come on DD India News Hour. Asian stocks rise to their highest in more than 2.5 years. And Indian chess contingent warmly welcomed home after securing their historic win. We'll tell you all that and more on the other side. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Now let's take stock of the stock markets in India. The Sensex and the Nifty 50 opened slightly lower on Tuesday, but the indices hit record highs driven by gains in metal and energy stocks in intraday trade. Nifty has been reaching new highs since the US Fed's 50 basis points rate cut, with global market optimism also fueling this surge. While Nifty hit a fresh high of 25,971, Sensex surpassed 85,000 for the first time and hit a milestone of 85,023. The Sensex was last up 130 points to trade above 85,058, while Nifty 50 was up 0.2% at 25,978 a short while ago. And Asian stocks rose on Tuesday to their highest in more than 2.5 years, heartened by broad stimulus measures from China. Chinese stocks also recorded highs, with the blue chip CSI 300 index rising 2.4%, while the Shanghai Composite Index gaining 2.4%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index jumped over 3.2% to a 4-month high, and MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan recorded a 0.9% rise. Japan's Nikkei rose 0.8% and touched a near 3-week high. German flag carrier Lufthansa is having some difficult times. The airline is complaining about the cost of doing business, and it's even cut one important route from Frankfurt to Beijing. And to tell us more about it, we have with us Lars Holter from Deutsche Welle, Berlin. Lars, what's going on at Lufthansa?
Thanks for having me. Well, let's look at that flight from Frankfurt to Berlin first that you just mentioned. Lufthansa has cut it, and there's a bunch of reasons for this step. First of all, the China business has been difficult for a while. Then came COVID and cuts drastically into air travel. Now, tourism has largely bounced back, but business travel has not. And for Germans, China has never been a major tourism destination. So most of the passengers Lufthansa flew back and forth between Frankfurt and Beijing were business travelers. Now that many businesses have switched from in-person meetings to online meetings, demand for the flight is simply shrinking. And there's also a few other problems. Ever since the EU has levied sanctions on Russia over Moscow's war in Ukraine, of course, Russia has closed off its airspace, forcing Lufthansa to fly a 2-hour detour and burn a lot more fuel than some competitors actually, like Emirates, Etihad and Qatar Airways do, because those airlines can still fly over Russia. So it seems right now, between rising cost and less demand, the route is not worth it for Lufthansa.
Okay, and what role, Lars, do Chinese airlines play in this market?
Yeah, they're becoming a lot more important too, and that's yet another factor why Lufthansa is having such a hard time with flights from Frankfurt to Beijing. By the way, they are still flying Munich-Beijing and have some flights to Shanghai too, so Lufthansa is not entirely out of the China market. But to get back to those Chinese airlines, they have been pretty aggressive about gaining market share. As we've seen in many business sectors otherwise, Chinese companies often receive subsidies and enter new markets at cutthroat prices that competitors can't match. And so it is here as well. Chinese airlines are flying cheaper, and they're even offering unheard of incentives as well. They're paying for hotel rooms for passengers who have an overnight layover. They've even offered city tours in layover cities complete with dinner, and again fully paid. Now that's deals that you won't get from Lufthansa or many other airlines who simply can't keep up. British Airways, by the way, has also cut their Chinese service, proof that the problems do not only affect German airlines.
Okay, thank you very much there, Lars Holte, reporting from Deutsche Welle Berlin. And it's time now for the sporting action. And to give us those sporting updates, we have Deepika Mehta with us. Deepika.
Good afternoon, Tanvi. First, let's talk about chess team's arrival back home, and we'll also get our viewers to know about the super interesting cricket match scheduled for today. To begin with chess first. Now, Indian chess contingent were warmly welcomed back at home after they created history, winning 2 gold medals at the recently concluded 45th Chess Olympiad in Budapest. Let's take a look at this report to know what the stars said on their arrival.
The Indian chess contingent returned to India after registering heroic performance at the 45th Chess Olympiad that concluded in Budapest. Team India created history, bagging back-to-back 2 gold medals, achieving a historic double podium finish. Speaking on the great achievement, Grandmaster D. Gukesh said that he's really happy with his performance and now his next target is the World Championship.
And I'm very happy with my performance and the team's performance.
Grandmasters R. Pragnananda and R. Vaishali were warmly welcomed by enthusiastic fans and supporters upon their arrival at the Chennai airport. Delighted Pragnananda said this achievement will now take the game to more number of people.
First time golden chess Olympiad, and we managed to do it at the same time, and it's a very proud moment for all of us.
I'm very happy to be part of the winning team in the Indian gold medal team in the Olympiad, which was held at Hungary. Both the teams have secured gold medal. It's like a historic moment.
Indian men's team captain Srinath said that everyone performed brilliantly. That includes individual performance as well.
I was the captain of the men's team, and as far as the men's team was concerned, it was a very smooth journey. We won 10 matches, we drew 1, and we won by a margin of 4 match points. Spectacular performances by all individual players as well. Gukesh and Arjun in particular, they had historic performances. All-time best performances.
India bagged 2 gold medals in Chess Olympiad, creating history and also signifying a new era of Indian chess that aims at bringing more eyeballs to the game. Sports Desk, DD India.
On to cricket now. England and Australia are set to face off each other in the third ODI of the 5-match series at the Riverside Ground in England on Tuesday. The match is set to begin in just a while from now, where Australia is leading 2-0 after dominant performances in first 2 matches. Now, this is going to be a must-win match for England if they hope to keep the series alive. The hosts, led by stand-in skipper Harry Brook, are under immense pressure to bounce back and avoid another series loss on home soil. The 3 Lions have suffered back-to-back defeats, putting them in a precarious situation. Meanwhile, the Australian team, led by Mitchell Marsh, have displayed a balanced and resilient approach despite missing some key players. Their batting depth and disciplined bowling have been instrumental in securing their 2-0 lead over Team England. In tennis, Rafael Nadal has been named as Spain's squad for the Davis Cup final late in November, joining forces with Carlos Alcaraz, Roberto Bautista, Pablo Carreño and Marcel Granollers. The 38-year-old former world number 1 has not competed since Paris Olympics, where he was beaten by Novak Djokovic in singles and exited the doubles in the quarterfinal round with his partner Carlos Alcaraz. Nadal withdrew from the US Open and Laver Cup due to fitness concerns. Spain, who are the 6-time Davis Cup champions, will face the Netherlands in quarterfinal round starting the 19th November. So those were the top highlights of the hour. Back to you, Tanvi.
Thank you very much, Deepika Mehto, giving us all the sporting action. Okay. A female cat has more freedom in Afghanistan than a woman does. This is what Hollywood actor and activist Meryl Streep said at the United Nations. In a bid to get world leaders to focus on the plight of Afghan women and girls, the actress said, a cat may go sit on her front stoop and feel the sun on her face. She may chase a squirrel into the park. A squirrel has more rights than a girl in Afghanistan. At present, most girls have been barred from high schools and women from universities by the Taliban. They are even barred from public parks there. The group has closed beauty salons, curtailed travel for women without a male guardian. That's all for this edition of DD India News Hour. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles. And you can also download our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen to download now. That's it in this broadcast. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching.